a lot of people hear the term free software and think it is only about code that runs on computers. But software is not just code that runs on computers, it's code that runs on societies. Our legal system, our entire legislature, is a piece of software that is running on top of our society. And once people recognize this as an open source project that is in the public domain, then a lot of interesting things can start to happen with it.
So let me break that into an example, right? Two people, want to rent a house. One person has a house, the other person wants to rent it. They have to go through a legal dance to sign the contract and have lawyers look at it, and there are certain preconditions that come from the society.
Yes.
And what you're saying is that set of legal stuff that has to happen before you complete a transaction is the kind of process which is now done by computers.
Well, it's the kind of process that could be done by computers instead.
Okay.
Or,
but for example, not for leasing a house, but like a credit card transaction. You swipe your card.
Transaction is a very good example.
And a whole bunch of stuff happens.
Because we've already had the electronic currency come into full force, and people are using electronic currency every day, but people haven't started to recognize the potential for electronic law. That is to say, that the entire legislative process be funneled through digital mediums as a way of organizing societies.
Okay, so there you've gone from the idea of these protocols which support transactions in the same way that law currently supports transactions, through to something about the idea of digitizing the law itself.
Yes.
So kind of like Wikipedia law.
Yes, exactly. Of course, Wikipedia law wouldn't really work because anybody can press the edit button and change things. What you need is a sort of proxying, stumbling process that gets consensus before it gets pushed into the realm where it's actually running code on top of the society.
So you're talking about a sort of direct democracy which is mediated by computers.
Yes.
I think a lot of people find that very scary. So
tell
me why you think this is a matter of fundamental freedoms.
Well, the best way to talk about this is to talk about a cyberneticist who did work on this in the 70s. He was hired by the Argentinian government.
Oh, you're talking about Stafford Beer,
Stafford
right?
Beer.
Allende's Chile.
It's Chile, yes.
That's right.
Sorry.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, Stafford Beer was hired by, who was it?
It's the Allende government.
Yeah, Allende. Yeah.
Allende, yeah.
He was hired by Allende to basically take every single system in the society and put it into a digital medium. So you would funnel statistics up through the system in several layers. And if anything is about to break on a lower level, then a warning light goes off at the next level up. Of course, this is somewhat communistic and totalitarian, but the idea is fundamentally sound. What they're talking about doing is not using the law as an imposition device. It's talking about using the data as soon as it becomes available as a way of shifting the function of society into a more elegant pathway.
So you sort of elegantly detect problems at an early stage and then compensate kind of dynamically,
Yes.
rather than having this kind of four-year cycle where you elect somebody whose job it is to fix the messes left from the furthest most four-year cycle.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I can see that would make for a more responsive society, but would it necessarily make for a freer one?
I believe it would, and I believe so because for this to work in a practical context, you need the entire system from the from the schematics of the circuit boards on up to the highest level where you have very abstract law. All of it has to be open in such a way that people can see what's going on in the internals. If you don't have that, then unfreedom will siphon in at some point and filter through to the top until you have a society where people are being arrested for having opinions on certain issues or any kind of the nonsense that's going on in today's society.
So at the core of this, what you're talking about is freedom coming from transparency.
Yes.
That if every aspect of the system, from the hardware through to the software, through to the policy, through to the law, through to the political process, is completely transparent, then there isn't a place for sort of coercion and similar subversion of the freedoms of the people to come in.
Yes. People will always try to subvert and to impose their will on others. What we can't really stop that from happening because that's human nature, but what we can do is try to stifle it and try to make sure that nobody has a reason to need to do that kind of thing.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that with enough openness and enough freedom and enough transparency, the attempts to bring down those kind of open societies will always be unsuccessful.
Yes. So at the bottom you have free hardware. On top of that you're running free software. On top of that you're running free law, as in free legislature. And to the side of that you need free education, because education is the cornerstone of society. If without enough education, people will stop realizing why this is an important idea. And of course, the higher up you go, you get to older concepts. Free speech is at the top, not at the bottom.
Can you say more about why free speech is at the top? Why is free speech the most fundamental right?
Because it's the most abstract right.
You're a mathematician.
I am.
So, say more about that.
Free speech is the most abstract right in that free speech only exists because we as humans have developed speech. But free hardware is essentially just a manipulation of the physical realm, and the software is in between.
Okay, so what you're saying is that free speech is in many ways a uniquely human right, as opposed to other rights which might exist between animals in a society.
Yes.
For example, wolves might think of themselves as having certain natural territorial rights, and what you're saying is that free speech is a uniquely human one,
Yes.
along with concepts like freedom of religion and so on.
And of course, anybody non-human is free to adopt these rights, but at the current point, we don't know anybody else who has that ability. So we're dealing in abstractions here, and all freedoms are essentially abstractions of something that exists in the way we experience life.
So what do you hope will come out of this conference on Saturday?
In a small scale, I'm hoping that it will
Grand Hotel.
open a lot of Icelandic people's eyes as to what is going on in the world, and get the entire social context of free software into the public discussion. In a larger scale, I'm hoping that through some sort of miracle we have enough impact for a chain reaction of events to occur. And judging from the caliber of people who are being attracted to this event, I think we have a pretty good chance of doing that.
So you're hoping that some kind of model of a way to implement these freedoms will come out of this, and that people will work together to bring those kind of freedoms into the mainstream?
Yes, so our main act of Saturday is a conference, and for our encore, we're going to change the world.